Brilliant. So, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. My name is Holly Barnes-Lomax, and I'm one of the members of the I forgot what we're called now, committee, Secondary and Further Education Committee at the English Association. And I'm very pleased to be able to host this session this afternoon. The EA is a learned society and subject association which was founded in 1906 to promote and support and celebrate the discipline of English studies. And we cover all stages of education from primary, early years through to secondary, further education and higher education and beyond. So we cover all parts of the discipline across language, linguistics, literature and creative writing. Events like this are made possible by contribution of our fabulous volunteer speakers. So a huge thank you to all three of them for giving up their time this afternoon to be able to share some fantastic practice from the further education sector with you. And also, it's our members that make these possible, these events free and open by paying their membership fees. So if you'd like to contribute to the national discussion that we have going on around English and to help and support our discipline, then please consider joining us. It can cost as little as £1 a week to support our events, and by campaigning for our work all year round, you'll get access to a range of fantastic journals and publications that we produce, including our latest one, which is around English and tech, which I really recommend anyone from any sector to get their hands on and have a read through. So it's my pleasure to hand over to our speakers in just a second. I thought it'd just be really a great opportunity just to kind of talk about the thinking around these events. If it's the first time that you've joined us for a Gathering Voices event, I think around a year ago now, we kind of all sat in a room with some English teachers and many other people at the EA, and we really wanted to kind of give voice to some English teachers in the sector. And we know how important it is to keep that collaboration going, especially we don't get a lot of time outside the classroom. You know, a lot of teachers working somewhat 24 hours teaching and then cover. And also with the kind of national view of what post-16 looks like post-COVID, we really just wanted to create space for voices. So Gathering Voices is on its third, maybe even its fourth session now. We've had one around functional skills specifically, where we've been able to bring in best practice. And we really hope that this is a starting point to kind of build a community and bring communities together that already exist for English teachers up and down the UK who are involved in post-16 discussion. So I'm going to hand over to our first speaker, which is Vanessa. And if you have any questions for Vanessa, pop them in the chat and then we'll pick them up afterwards. Vanessa, over to you.
Thank you. I'm just sharing my screen now, so I'm going to be that annoying person that says, "Can you see my screen?"
Yeah, we can.
Hopefully, perfect. So I'm Vanessa, she, her. I teach at Bury College, so Northwest based. This is the first time attending one of these, so thank you for inviting me to speak as well at that. I guess the things that I'm kind of going to talk around is not anything new, and I'm hoping that we're all kind of going to share similar issues and kind of be a bit more collaborative with it. So I'm not saying that I've got the answers to anything, I've got anything kind of mind breaking for it, but the way that we've kind of tried to approach GCSE English, especially since the pandemic, is kind of more of a skills-based approach. So making GCSE English more relevant, relatable and engaging. And I really don't have the answers to that, and I wish I did. So I'm hoping that we can share some ideas to that, because many of our students in FE are resitting, sometimes as many as 6 or 7 times resitting. And I don't envy them having to kind of do that. The exam is so focused on what I think, and it's subjective to my opinion, is quite unrelatable content for the types of students that are resitting so many times. And I guess resitting students are more likely to face barriers that have prevented them from achieving in the past. That's possibly some of the reasons why they might be there again, especially the kinds of learners that I know that I teach. I guess what we have is more of a kind of two-tier system. I was looking at some facts and figures before, trying to find some data around the kinds of students that are resitting, and London and the South East versus the rest of the country is, I guess, the main divide. And that's worsened since the pandemic. No surprise that private schools continue to outperform state schools, and then the kinds of learners that we get in FE resitting are going to be the kind of students that are struggling. The content then, I think, needs to be pitched more at the students that are resitting, and then the kinds of content that we teach as well. But even if we differentiate the work that we do within the classroom, often they're going into an exam that is not pitched in the way that we would differentiate. We know our learners, we know the kinds of learners we teach, we differentiate for that, and then they sit an exam that isn't. One of the ways in which we've tried to combat this, and it's been so nice on LinkedIn and different spaces to collaborate with other areas, is by switching to Pearson 2.0, which I know is what a lot of colleges in the Northwest and in different areas are looking to do. And kind of looking at how we can make resitting students almost a different section of resitting, because they're not the same as the students that have been doing it in high school. And trying to make that hopefully a little bit more of a skills-based approach. I struggle with that, and I'm saying that as somebody that I teach it often, or try not to, but to the exam, especially, our learners are sitting the exam in November, some of them will be anyway. It's so hard to not teach that as a skills-based, an exam-based approach, question by question, when you've got literally 8 weeks since the start of starting in September, and it's not enough time to do nice things and to do all of that skills-based stuff. So any suggestions on that as we go through it, please do, because I guess we have more time to maybe think about more creatively how we do things after that November exam, which we have tried to do, but probably not been as successful with that in the first kind of November resit, because it's just so quick. But then I think that's where we end up ultimately with students that don't see the real life benefit to GCSE English, because they don't see the skills that it delivers. They just see it as an exam that they have to sit, which then becomes a punishment of sitting in a classroom for 3 hours a week, whilst the friends who have passed don't have to do those extra 3 hours, or whatever it ends up being. It's ultimately, for most of them, seen as a bit of a punishment. And then when it's off their timetable, do we never look at English again? Do we never do any skills-based work with English? Because even when they've passed, again, maybe this is just my learners, and hopefully you can add to this too. They leave in school and college having passed GCSE English, but still lacking basic skills. And I've taught some additional T-level lessons where the learners, English-based T-level sessions where the learners in theory should have a grade 4 or above. And the kinds of stuff that I'm still kind of working with them on is basic spelling, punctuation and grammar. So clearly there's something that they're not gaining there, even when they've passed GCSE English. They're not able to write articles, letters, put together the basic structure of things that they should be hopefully learning in GCSE English. So one of the ways that we started to look at this last year is when the learners, and you've got my lovely face on there as well, along with Simon, one of my colleagues, on the picture on the left there, we went to visit the Mayor of Greater Manchester, and we delivered some things from our projects that we started last year. Once our learners have sat the November exam, I'm guessing it's probably similar elsewhere. You have that space of time, that no man's land in between, where they're waiting for the results, and it's almost again seen as a punishment that they have to still sit in English until they get the results, and kind of that middle ground bit. So we tried to do a bit of a project, and I won't take credit for this because it was Simon's a wonderful project and an idea, to get somebody or something from the community that would be relevant and relatable for our students. Most of them didn't even know who Andy Burnham was. Obviously, we're Northwest based, so he is our Mayor of Greater Manchester, and they didn't even know that we had one. So it was such a great opportunity for the students to be able to find out about something that is within their area, practice. So letter writing was the focus, and it was to do with, as you can see there, the B network, which was or is a bus system kind of brought into Greater Manchester. And when we looked into that a lot more, because that was something that all of our students used and had issues with or enjoyed for various different reasons. And we wrote those letters, we proofread those letters, we did a whole project around it, and then we ultimately delivered those letters to Andy Burnham. And I'm not saying he read every single letter from the student, I'm sure he didn't, but with the help from his assistants and that lovely lady there too, gave us a feedback with a video to say thank you to our students and give some feedback to the questions that they had sent him. And I remember in the lesson when we kind of did the video and we did the feedback to our students, and it was really nice. So many of the students in every single one of my lessons and across most of my other colleagues' groups too, was really genuinely surprised that we had sent those letters, that it was a real project that we was doing, and that there was a real outcome from it, because they just wasn't used to anything being relatable to real life, that the letters had an impact and that Andy Burnham actually responded to them. So it's something that we're looking to continue this year with local politicians in our area, hopefully getting people in to make that more relatable and realistic, and then hopefully build on some skills for the future from it. And it's just one of the ways, or small ways, I think, that we're trying to bring it out from the classroom and get the students to think of it more than just an exam that they have to sit, and doing it kind of question by question, which links in with Pearson 2.0, because as a team, we're so unfamiliar with it. We can't possibly teach it question by question, which we've all said we like, because there is such a danger, I think, with GCSE English of teaching it in that way. So I think I've said a lot there. And again, I'm not saying that I've got the answers to that. I'm really hoping that if we've got some question and answer time and guests in the chat as well, that we can start to collaborate more as a network around what ideas you all have, what do you do in your areas to make it more relatable, and what kind of issues do we share, and how we can maybe combat that to make it more relatable and relevant and hopefully engaging for our students.
Thanks, Vanessa. At the end of the last Gathering Voices, I actually shared your LinkedIn group that you set up for Pearson 2.0. So Vanessa set up on LinkedIn like a bit of a space where people can ask questions, share ideas, upload things. So if you wanted to share that in this forum again, Vanessa, you're more than welcome to. Thank you so much for that. It really kind of hones in on an approach that we're doing over here at Chesterfield College, which is looking at the skills-based approach this year, and from collaborating with people at Calderdale and also from another college in the area, Aspire. They also took that skills-based approach this year as well because of how the exam set out. So it's really good to hear that other people are kind of following that. So it'd be good to see what comes out of that. There are a couple of questions, so I'll fire them away at you if that's all right.
Yeah, go for it.
So we had a first question was from Victoria, and she said, what do you feel about the latest Pearson grade boundaries? Do you still have faith in the spec, and did your results suffer?
I'm interested to see what everyone else says about that. So we haven't done Pearson 2.0 yet. This will be our first year. I guess we're slightly different to some other people because we decided to stick with AQA for the November reset so that our students could have one last ditch attempt at that. And also as a bit of a bargaining tool for attendance, because what we wanted to be able to do was kind of have a fresh new exam for the summer, so that those that either don't sit in November, or unfortunately don't get the grade 4 this time around, they don't feel like they've failed yet another different exam, and then kind of going forward we don't have anything different to do. So that was like our reasoning behind that. I guess I was a bit curious about the Pearson 2.0 results, and I don't know until they sit it. I'm hopeful still that our learners will see it as something different, just because of the smaller questions, and a lot of our students really struggle with getting through all of the content in the time that they've got. But I'm open to other people maybe that have actually sat that Pearson 2.0 exam could probably answer that a little bit better.
Thank you, Vanessa. Couple more comments just around the grade boundaries, and people commented on that. Elizabeth has just popped in there. A great example of project-based learning in action with local community engagement. So that's a nice comment as well. Again, just a comment around grade boundaries. How's your team taken to delivering Pearson? How are the rest of the team feeling about it? Did you have like a good buy-in from them?
Yeah, we was, but I mean, we was all really nervous to begin with. No one likes change, least of all me. And all of us have been kind of teaching, our team is so experienced. We've all been teaching AQA for a good number of years now. And you're comfortable with what you know. You can walk into a classroom and teach it with your eyes shut, AQA. It just is what it is. But then we ultimately came to the decision that it's not about what's best for us as a team. It's about what's best for the learners, and that we can learn a new spec. And we had the summer holidays, and it was really nice, actually, as much as it was scary to begin with, really nice to have something different to look at, and hopefully use that with the learners to support them, because they've been doing it for so long. And some of our groups will be fresh new learners that are obviously straight out of high school, but some of them will have been here for a good few years doing the same exam again and again. So I think the buy-in is is good and exciting from the students and from the staff. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that, Vanessa. If you've got any
Thanks.
more questions for Vanessa, pop them in the chat. I'm sure she'll be able to pick them up as she's tuning in. And we're going to hand over to Angie now, if that's all right, Angie.
No problem. Let me just load this up. Hello, everyone. I'm not as good on Zoom as Vanessa was, but I think this will all sound a little familiar. So I'm going to talk very much kind of about what Vanessa's spoken about. So you can all see that on your screen. Yeah.
Yeah, we
Brilliant.
can.
Okay, so this is what I wanted to talk to you about today. So my name is Angie Lenton. I'm the English Development and Quality Manager at Northampton College. This year we have got 1,800 students doing GCSE English, which is about 260 more than we did last year. So I think everybody's seeing the same thing, aren't we? It's just this huge increase. And interestingly, we're seeing a gap, that big gap that used to be between the number of students we're getting for maths and the ones we're getting for English is getting narrower. So the maths is coming down, but the English seems to be going up in our area anyway. I don't know about everybody else's. But I wanted to share with you that we've moved to Pearson 2.0 as well, and we've got our own slightly different approach, Vanessa. And it'd be really interesting to do some collaboration a little bit earlier on. I want to talk to you about how we've decided to start that off, the reasons why we chose that, and our criteria for the November exams as well. I thought I'd start at the beginning because there's an awful lot to talk about, isn't there, when you're an English teacher? So our move to Pearson 2.0. Our results have been okay. It's been fairly static. Just below the national average, just above the national average for most years. So we've done okay, but I think we've been with AQA for a long time. I felt as well, I know they've got a little better with FE recently in the last year or so, but before that there was just no engagement with FE from AQA at all. And that was one of the major reasons, as well as the fact that really wanted to reinvigorate our English team. So, kind of inject a bit of, oh, I haven't done this before. Let's see what we can do with this, which has happened to a certain extent. We also wanted to encourage students to leave those bad habits behind, but we're also quite aware of the fact that they might be quite anxious about the fact that they've never seen this before. And we are getting them to do it in the November resit. So we've put in a little programme for them, which will hopefully make them feel a bit better about things. So we've called it Jumpstart Programme. What this is in the first 7 weeks, so up until October half term, what we're doing with all of our students is we've got a booklet that we've based on the June and November 2022 papers into a booklet. So we've taken out all the other pages. It costs a fortune to print, sorry trees, but that's what we've done. So every student has one of those booklets in the classroom, and we're working through one set of papers. Now we're only focusing on a few key questions, but the reason why we did this was because of that anxiety around not knowing what they're doing. We didn't want to get them up until January and then start showing them some papers. So we really wanted to build that familiarity with the questions. It was a bit of a fine line as well between saying, oh, look how close it is to AQA, but also at the same time, don't bring the same mistakes. It's different. Let's have a look at this instead. So that's what we've done. I think we were the same, very much the same as Vanessa and her teachers. Some of the teachers were reluctant to move across, but it was only because they were really confident with AQA, and we had developed over the years really good program which was skills based for the first 12 weeks, and then we went into exam prep stuff. But with this one, I think everybody felt a little bit more comfortable taking it question by question this time, but so we will adapt it for later on in the year and for next year, but it was just to help the teachers this time round. So we chose some specific questions to focus on. So those are the ones that with AQA traditionally they didn't do particularly well with, so we were focusing on those ones. We also wanted to let the students know that the assessment objectives were the same. And I think everybody who's gone to Pearson has had some amazing training. We had some from a lady called Julie Hughes, who is just amazing. And she, Cambridge Regional College put on some training with her as well recently that I went along to. She's really up for active learning, getting those students out of the seat, you know, not doing the traditional, let's sit down and copy down from the board. So we're trying to promote it as that kind of program as well, that kind of GCSE. We're building it up. I think it's going to take a year round to really get to, you know, to perfect things to where we want them to be. But we're hoping that will build student confidence and alleviate that somewhat, that anxiety that they have. So all our students are on GCSE English. We will pick out or hand pick some students after study review who we feel that might be better for entry-level functional skills, but it's only to build up their confidence on the way to GCSE. We did it last year with about 30-40 students, and it worked really well. Actually, one of the ones that has achieved last week, sorry, I've got a student at the door, went on to, is really enjoying GCSE English and hated it last year. So we're hoping it's going to really inspire those students. So we're not going to put everybody in for the November resits. Normally what we do is students go along to their normal English timetabled lessons, and then if they want to do the November resit, they have to go to additional classes, which is a nightmare for staffing. We know what retention and recruitment is like at the minute, so we decided to change it completely, and this is for maths and English this year. So we're taking everybody through that Jumpstart programme. We've got 2 little mini assessments in there. Now, this isn't just for grade 3 students. If we have any shining stars that we feel could move from the 1 to the 2, the 2 to the 3, we're going to put those students through as well. Still don't know quite how many that's going to be yet. We're marking those mini assessments based on this summer's grade boundaries. I did see someone commenting on that before. We have decided to go with it. You know, grade boundaries are grade boundaries, and you know, you just have to keep pushing the students. So we're going to see how that works. We have put some other criteria as well on the November resit. So they have to demonstrate that they're ready. So that is by, for the grade 3s, by achieving 50% on their mini assessments. The reason we put mini assessments in is a lot of our teachers have got maybe 220 students, so we can't be marking all of those papers of time. So we've had to really cut down to those key questions. We've also put in a new EAA process this year, which I know is a bugbear for everybody, especially for the November resits. But we put together a form asking the students, the new ones that came to us, which is probably about 1,200 of them, what school they went to before, did they get, what exam access arrangements did they get in the summer, and basically we've collated all of that and we've sent it off to our EAA department, and they are bulk contacting the schools to get the Form 8s and the Form 9s. So we're hoping it's going to be a bit of an easier process this year. We've also got the students to tick, no, I didn't have any exam access arrangements, or no, I don't want any exam access arrangements. And we're going to be sticking that in front of the students' exercise books, because I don't know about you, but when it comes up to the exams, students will say, I told my teacher I needed this, this and this, and it's not in place, and we can never prove anything. So this is a real clear picture to the students, what they've told, what they've communicated, and what they can actually get in their exam. So we'll update it for the summer, because obviously people will change. But because we've moved to Pearson, our MIS department have said that they need every single student's UCI number, and they also need the spoken language assessment as well, and we need to record that, which we don't normally on our enrolments. So that's another criteria for entering that November resit, is that we have that, because as far as I understand, the MIS side of it, they have to put in different codes depending on whether they've got a spoken language or assessment or not. So that's basically what we are doing for the start of this year. So that was really just taking you through our first 6 or 7 weeks. Honestly, don't know what the numbers are going to be yet. We'll have to wait and see in November. But again, just like Vanessa, really up for any collaboration. We are collaborating with Cambridge College, hopefully, to put some revision materials together for the end of the year, which will be really interesting if anybody wants to take part in that. But that's mine. We're going to the chat thing.
Thanks, Angie.
Okay.
I just want to echo that I went to that training as well that was down at Cambridge Regional and with Julie, and it was really, really good. It, as Angie said, it was really refreshing to actually see different things, actually, you know, different techniques that really did get students out of their seats, and, you know, be a part of that and actually try out the activities rather than just be given the activities to do. So yeah, I really appreciate that training as well.
That's brilliant.
Just gonna have a look in the chat. Someone said one of the most appealing things about Pearson's 2.0 is the fact that the marks for reading are spread, works better for our learners. I know you've been delivering Pearson for a couple of years now, haven't you, Angie?
No, this is our
Oh,
first year.
is it?
Yeah,
I thought you'd
yeah.
been delivering it for a couple of years.
No,
My
started
mistake.
this September.
Wow. So we're all finding it out together, which is quite nice, isn't it? Someone's put a comment around, it feels like Pearson does a lot to support resits other than other awarding bodies. Is that a fair impression? I suppose other people in the chat can probably pick that one up as well.
I think they do. I mean, it was one of our reasons for going across. We all know when we try and get hold of AQA, you can never speak to anybody. They say they'll respond to your email in like 3 or 4 days, but with AQA, you can get through to someone straight away. I was really impressed.
Yeah, we've had some really fantastic training from Pearson as well in terms of their marking training, and I don't know if you've undergone that yet, Angie, but
Yeah.
they've come out face to face and delivered that training with booklets, and again really worked through some of those examples, which I know you can get through AQA Hub previously, but just in terms of me being here at a relatively new college and working with them, it's been really great. So yeah, fabulous. Thank you so much. If you've got any more questions for Angie, some really things I'm going to pick up on with you afterwards, actually, Angie, some interesting stuff, especially about the EAA, because I know that's buzzing around everyone's minds at the minute. Definitely, I like the idea of putting it in the front of the books, actually, because it's a good quick reminder for anyone else that picks up that, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I'll definitely be picking your brains on a few other things. So thank you.
Okay.
I'm just going to pass over to our last speaker now. Then, Matthew, are you with us? Can you hear us? You can hear us.
I definitely can. I'm just laughing because I'm hoping you can hear me.
We
Oh,
can
brilliant.
now. We can.
Brilliant. Yeah, you can now. I'm so sorry, Holly, everyone. In fact, I was messing about at the start of the session trying to sort out what I could hear, what I couldn't hear, and it just became a complete mess. So I logged out about 3 times and logged back in again, and it looks like the last one's worked. So thanks for that, and sorry about messing about. Hello, everyone. My name is Matt Gordon. I'm from New City College. So it's a large group basically of colleges. I'm at Epping Forest, so I was up in northeast London. And what I was going to, well, just before I start, really, I just wanted to kind of think about and echo some of those points that people are making about Pearson, AQA, and so on, because it's an interesting one for me because we do Educast, so we do the it's the Welsh board, but the English version, if you like, of the Welsh board. So it's not the WJEC, it's Educast, and that the specs there are quite different in many ways, or at least the final exams are quite different in terms of what AQA and what EdExcel do. I've not got a great deal of experience in terms of teaching EdExcel, but I've seen it in terms of marking and so on. And AQA got lots of experience in terms of teaching as well as marking as well, there are obviously similarities between all the specifications. In theory, they're testing all the same areas, but they do things quite differently. So one thing I picked up that somebody made a comment about I think it was Rachel, about the idea about the marks spread across different questions for the reading part. That's what they do for Educast as well, for one paper. So in one paper, it's very much line based, lines 1 to 7 and then 8 to 16 or whatever, and it's question by question for one paper. So that's, I think, a nice thing. It's quite accessible to a lot of our students for the fiction paper. But for the non-fiction paper, it's the whole text. So they kind of switch that, if you like, to the whole text for the second paper. let's say called component 2. And in terms of similarities, differences, again, from AQA, for example, for Educast that we do, there's no specific question on structure, for example. There's not a single question which talks about, how does the writer interest you as a reader through structure and all that sort of stuff. So it doesn't exist on Educast. Again, that seems to be quite popular with the students, especially when they come from AQA and you tell them that, they're like, yeah, we don't have to do the structure question. Educast do build it in, though. They build it into 2 or 3 questions, actually, in terms of the bullet points. So they talk about, you must talk about language, tone, and structure, or you should talk about language, tone, and structure, that kind of thing. So it is there, sort of, rearing its ugly head in terms of structure, but it's not a specific question for the Educast one. And again, a lot of students are quite relieved about that sort of fact. And again, sort of similarities and differences. They do have the evaluation question, of course, to what extent you agree. And in fact, there's 2 of them, one on paper 1 and one on paper 2, but they're both 10 markers. So again, they don't have that 20-mark AQA sort of high stakes feeling to it. They're both high stake, but at least it's 10 marks and not 20. What Educast do, I suppose, which is very similar but also a little bit different from what Pearson AQA do, is obviously you've got writing. Obviously, it's 50% of the overall mark, overall qualification, and they give them a bit of a choice for the fiction ones. They give them a choice of 4, 3 stories and 1 description. They choose and they do it. But for the non-fiction writing, the persuasive and transactional stuff, they don't get any choice, but they get two tasks. They get a 20-mark task and another 20-mark task. So I thought it might or might not be useful just for you guys to hear about that, because there is obviously, like I say, some similarities, differences between the specs. But with Educast, we found here, it seems to be, how can I put this in a nice way, more accessible to more students who are coming from the AQA specs, for example, and then go on to Educast, and we teach them obviously slightly different and get them to do things slightly differently, but they tend to, what's the word, sort of mesh, if you like, into that new system of doing things quite well. And for the Pearson 2.0, very few I've seen come from that. From the old Pearson spec, yes, they come onto it, but I've not seen any yet. Students are coming on from Pearson to Educast. But for me, I found it for our research a lot. Sometimes they being the students, sometimes they want that kind of explanation. So this is what's different about what you've done in the past, and this is what's the same. So that sometimes that can help the initial conversations and getting them back into the swing of actually doing the work when they really don't want to. Yeah, there's lots lot of different differences really, and I would recommend the Educast one because, like I say, I think for a lot of students in FE, it tends to be a bit more accessible. You've still got the Victorian text, of course. It's still non-fiction. That still presents its own problems as well. I love some of the comments I saw about the virtual classroom and stuff. I think what a great idea. But the difference, I suppose, again with Pearson is there's no fiction. It's just non-fiction, which is similar to what AQA do, from my understanding. Anyway, that's not actually what I was going to talk to you about. What I wanted to talk to you about was just something that we started last year, or I should say I started last year as a part of Action Research. It was a supported experiment thing we did here, and we all have to do, all the English teachers and the maths guys have to do a sort of a mini experiment, if you like, throughout the year. And my one became, it started off relatively small, it got bigger and bigger and bigger, which is often a feature of sort of Action Research stuff, so I'm sure a lot of people know about who are listening here. And so what I want to do is just very briefly just show you a few things that relate to that Action Research. So you should hopefully be able to see my screen now, which is a bit of students' work. And just to introduce it started off, like I say, last year as a support experiment where I wanted to try and investigate how the students and how me as a practitioner, how I'm targeting particular skills that are on Educast and on any specification in a kind of short and snappy way. So it's a bit of a warmer, if you like, to get the students into the lesson and also to target specific skills that they'll be using in the lesson, as well as, indeed for the final exams and that sort of stuff. So I'm just going to wing my way through very quickly through some examples from last year of this worksheet that I was using. And it started off as a worksheet, basically, good old fashioned, nothing new there, but a worksheet as a warmer. So I started off giving them little bits of the text that they were going to look at, or one of them anyway, they were going to look at when they were doing 2 texts for non-fiction, for example. So here's a little bit of the source A, which is the first one. That's the from Horrible Histories. You might recognise it by the British Empire. So there's a little bit of the text, and then you've got a little bit of text that's Kipling being very horrible about the Germans back in 1912, I think it was. And so the idea was to expose them, if you like, to a little bit of text, Victorian as well as more modern, and then get them to think about how they can use it and what sort of things they can say about it as a kind of starter. And so what they did was they had to read the two texts, and then write a short summary that's targeting a bit of reading comprehension in general, but also specifically a question 5 on the EDUCAS, which is the summary question for the paper 2. Quote selection, obviously good for everything really, but mainly thinking about the comparison question there. So just picking out a couple of quotes. And then they had a page 2, that was page 1, and page 2 where they're starting to work on vocab. And some of these notes are here, you can kind of ignore them, they're for me really, but it's just to show how things developed, because that was back in October, November 23. And then I started to develop this worksheet, because remember, it was supposed to be a warmer. And what I found is a lot of students were taking a lot of time of the lesson, more time than they're meant to really, trying to get through this worksheet. So I started to work on it and adapt it in terms of, okay, let me shorten the text. So there's a much shorter 2 text there. Summary question remains. And then page 2 was supposed to be a vocabulary development. And again, I was trying to target, yes, developing vocabulary for its own sake, obviously for paper 1, for the story and stuff, but also for paper 2 in terms of the writing. And I was trying to be a bit more specific in terms of, rather than just use it, in a paragraph, start and make an engaging start to a talk or article using some or all of those words. So again, this is students' work being shown here. The green ink is me, that's my disgusting writing, so MG, my initials, and I'm talking them through. That's that VF, that verbal feedback sort of thing. That's, again, something we do at New City. We try and do it pretty much every session. So they'll do a little bit of work. It could be part of a worksheet. It could be a much more substantial kind of piece of work. And then we'll go around and try and mark it in front of the student and give them a mark or a bit of feedback as well. And sometimes that's just verbal. So that's the VF bit there. And so what I'm trying to show you is how this sort of developed over time, because it started off quite big in terms of lots to do. I did keep some aspects of it. So summary sort of stayed. That's only a 1 text. Paper 1, but I still wanted to get them to think about what's going on in that little bit of text. Then there's quote selection, and then these are slightly better examples, basically from different students. I'm just scrolling through them as we go, and there's a bit more feedback of mine as well, talking about why they've selected that quote. What's the possible impact or effect of language, and that's actually that point about the impact or effect of language relates to some of the stuff I was talking about. Let me just go back to my screen. I'm so sorry. Some of the stuff relates to the differences, I suppose, between AQA and EDUCAS. So with AQA, and I'm thinking Pearson as well, obviously they're looking for correct terminology, but they're mainly focusing on the impact of the language, aren't they, in terms of what the student is talking about. And the trouble with that is I've seen quite a few students who are coming from AQA onto EDUCAS are kind of still fixed into that AQA way of doing things. So they're looking for the terminology, to use the correct terminology, and then to, as they say, the students say, sort of zoom in on a particular part of it and discuss it. Now for EDUCAS, yes, they do want the correct terminology, but to be perfectly honest with you, students could use no terminology or get it wrong and still score very highly up in terms of the mark scheme, because what they're looking for with EDUCAS is, do the students understand it? Can they show that they have a comprehension of the text, and show they're selecting a particular quote for a particular reason, and then of course discussing the impact or the effect of that language. So you can basically get very high marks on EDUCAS with using zero terminology or very little terminology. And what I've seen is students often from school, from AQA coming into FE, they're still kind of obsessed with the terminology. They're looking for the simile, they're looking for the verb, looking for the metaphor, and being able to use it in their answer. And I keep telling them, a lot of them, just say word or phrase and talk about the effect of that word or phrase, because that's what's going to get them the better marks, rather than thinking about the terminology. So that's me just pointing out a few things to students. So there's other things going on there, but talk about the language. This was the main focus, to be honest. The original intention behind this whole worksheet idea was to get them to expand their vocabulary, either for fiction or non-fiction kind of work. And the reason I'm talking about it now is because it became quite a popular thing. A lot of students liked doing it, not everyone, but a lot of students liked that idea of kind of warming up certain skills and featuring vocabulary as part of that, as a sort of starter. Where it became more effective is when it it was linked directly to the text they were looking at in the lessons. That became, you saw those light bulb moments, those penny dropping moments. They go, we've seen this word before, like confident or desperation or whatever. And the reason I'm talking about it now is because, like I say, it worked out quite well. There's just some stats we can look at here, just very briefly. That number, question 1, how useful have you found your learning? A vast majority found it either, somewhat useful or extremely useful to actually use the worksheets in class, and then wanting to continue, and then a bit of a mixed picture if they want to do any homework. No major surprise there. But the reason I wanted to talk about it today is because I've kind of kept using it, kept using this worksheet idea, but I've got rid of the idea of the worksheet in its entirety. I might come back and use worksheets because I've got loads of them in terms of stuff I can adapt or just reuse for stuff after maybe Christmas, and then just focus on particular skills, so summary or just quote selection or vocab, whatever it happens to be. But what I found it most useful, and this is what I'm going through to this year, this is a current one I'm using, is instead of doing it as a worksheet, I'll just use it as a warmer. So, as they come in the room, basically, the do now sort of task is to do that, to get them using their thesaurus, not their phones, get them understanding what a synonym is and an antonym is, putting the synonyms in for these selected words, and then I link this idea of what they've actually done, this vocabulary development, by getting them to use it in a sentence. So it would be a specific sentence or a very short paragraph using all or some of the synonyms to express something. So to express anger or to express a belief or whatever it happens to be. And then leading on from that, I'll link it into this sort of skills focus, which is what this slide is talking about. And this is an overview, if you like, that I use for all the classes, especially in the early days, is to give them, an overview of what you need to do per question, per paper. And what I usually do is link this idea of vocabulary development and then put it into writing to actually answering the questions. So it's not just vocabulary development for writing, obviously, and most of them get that straight away. Yes, if I've got a better vocabulary, I'm going to get better marks, which is more or less, a straight equation. But also it helps them explain themselves better when it comes to questions like that. Question 3, question 4, question 5 for paper 1, and then question 2 and 4, and to a certain extent question 6 as well, the comparison question. So the idea I'm trying to get them to think about is, using a variety of words to express an idea. Yes, obviously that's going to help you in terms of the writing, whether it's a story or whether it's a speech or an article or whatever, for the writing parts, but it also can help express yourself better to students when it comes to the reading questions, like questions 3 and 4 and 5 here. And so again, I'm sure that I'm not the only one of this, but a lot of the students will say, I'm saying the same sort of thing, or I'm repeating myself, or sir, can you give us another word for show? That sort of stuff. And so I'm trying to get them into the pattern of, what, you can just repeat that word sometimes, as long as it's a new quote and you're making a slightly different point, you'll be right. Or, use your brain, show, display, convey, portray, showcase, there's loads of synonyms basically of that, which help you just kind of explain yourself a bit better, or maybe stop yourself being repeated all the time, repeating the same point all the time. And that actually leads to this final slide I'm going to leave you on. This is a technique, again, for EDUCAS, and I think it probably could work for other awarding bodies as well, but to get them to track their answer through the text. In other words, they're using words and phrases like firstly, secondly, thirdly, and fourthly, if necessary, later and earlier, because they can pick up marks on that from structure. Remember what I said earlier, there's no specific question structure, but it is built in some of the bullet points, because they are structuring, if you like, their answer through the text. So their first point is obviously from the first line or two, second point is from the second or third line, and so on and so forth. And they can go back and forth. They can go earlier in the text and they can jump towards the end as well. So the point I'm trying to make to the students here is, and this comes back to this idea of EDUCAS, AQA, and the differences and so on. What EDUCAS are looking for is the comprehension. Do they know what is being talked about in the text? Can they use a wide range of examples? So they are targeting specifically on the use of the text. So for a 10-mark question, students will often ask me this: how many quotes do I need? And I'll usually say, typical sort of English teacher thing, as many as you can, or try and come down to a specific number where they're using, for example, 10 different quotes or 7 or above.
Sorry, Matt, just to jump in. Are you supposed to be sharing your PowerPoint now, because we can only see your words?
Sorry,
That's
yes.
okay.
Oh, I'm so sorry, yeah. So the PowerPoint, sorry, I was just talking about
No, you're fine.
is this one. Let me just reshare that. It won't, hopefully, I haven't confused you too much. But basically what I was referring to was this one. I'm hoping you can all see that now.
Yeah, we can.
Yep.
Thank you.
So basically, to cut a long story short, or rather a very long story a bit shorter, in terms of the worksheets I was talking about, that's sort of transformed into that essentially. It's just a sort of mind map exercise, but I link that mind map exercise into them to produce a sentence or two using those words, and then link it into this, which is one I was talking about a moment ago, where the students are talking about specific questions, for example. Can you see that, guys? Sorry, that PowerPoint.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, the second page. So that's an overview I was just talking about. And I try and link this idea of vocabulary development, like I say, not just for the writing side of things, but also for the other questions there, especially the question 3, question 4, question 5 for paper 1, question 2, question 4, question 6 for paper 2. In other words, they use those synonyms to explain themselves a bit better, or try and explain themselves a bit better when it comes through from vocabulary development. And the last one I was just talking about here was that one. That's the tracking example I was just mentioning, where they're tracking their way through the text to pick up marks, obviously on comprehension, on language, but also actually on structure. And that's the one, this method, if you like, actually comes from Educast. I went to a training thing they did last year, and they were giving examples of students who actually scored quite well on 10-mark questions using this kind of system. So they were literally, firstly, they made their point, put in a quote, very short explanation, and then move on to a second point. And some of those students were getting a 7 or an 8 out of 10 for doing that. So in other words, that last sort of point towards the bottom there, where it sort of talks about, helps you pick up marks on a range of examples and on structure, that's what I've brought back into the classroom in terms of getting them to use the text as much as possible. So like I was saying a moment ago, it's a 10-mark question. They really need to be using about 7, 8, 9 different or 10 different quotes, nice and short, embedded in their explanations, in order to get access to a higher range of the mark scheme. And a lot of students I'm seeing at the moment, obviously it's fairly early days, are still coming in with that sort of AQA way of doing things. So they'll pick out, let's say, 1 or 2 quotes, maybe 3. They'll zoom in on a particular word or phrase. They'll go for a bit of terminology, and they'll try and get a bit of depth and explanation. And as good as that is, and sometimes it is very good, it's not going to get you the higher marks for Educast, because Educast are looking for that, but in a much shorter, snappier way. In other words, they want them to use the text a lot more. So they're better off using 5 or 6 or 7 different short quotes with a very short explanation and no terminology to get 5 or 6 or 7 out of 10, rather than focusing on 2 or 3 examples, let's say, and then going for a bit of depth. So to bring it back, if you like, to this idea of vocabulary development, the original idea was to use like I say, a worksheet to try and focus on particular skills. And last year, some students did it very well. So I set it at a particular time, so give them 10 to 15 minutes, see how much they could do, they get a bit of feedback. It worked quite well, and had pretty good results last year as well. But this year, I'm thinking maybe save that sort of skills focus, like summary, quote selection for the lessons, obviously, but also maybe into next year after the mocks that we do in December, for example. So they start thinking more about particular skills and particular questions, and just maintain, and this is what I have been maintaining so far from beginning of September, really, is this idea of getting them to use a thesaurus, coming up with synonyms, putting it into a sentence or a very short paragraph for their writing ability, but also to try and get them to think, okay, there are different ways I can express pretty much the same point. In other words, I can just vary my synonym, or vary my show into a display or a showcase, to essentially make the same point again, but using a nice new quote in order to me to pick up the marks. So the vocab stuff, like I say, it refers to the writing side, but it does actually refer to the comprehension side as well.
You've got some good things happening in the chat here, Matt. Thank you so much. A few people are asking if you can send that along, and I've just mentioned that we will put the PowerPoints, anything that has been shown today, in an email out with the recording, if that's okay with everybody. I'm just conscious about our time, so thank you so much. I didn't want to cut you off there because there was so much stuff of good value that we're all taking down. But I think it's also really important that we just get 5 minutes to collaborate in a breakout room. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set up some breakout rooms, and they'll randomly assign people. What they'll do is they will either, it should ask you to join the room. So I'm hoping that that's what happens. If you get lost for whatever reason, don't worry, I'll be out here in the atmosphere. But it'd be really great for people to just connect. I know that a lot of people have made quite a good amount of connections from coming to these Gathering Voices events. So even if it's just 5 minutes, just swapping email addresses in a breakout room, I think that's, exactly what our sector needs is each other at the minute, isn't it? So I'll just create those. It should have allocated you all to them. I've just opened up the rooms. So hopefully you should be able to join your room, and I'll bring us all back at the last minute just to close off.
Looks like quite a lot of people haven't, Holly.
Some people are still hopping into rooms, figuring out how to get in there. Oh, Zoe, Samine, Alison, Lucy, you all okay? You all okay to join your room? You should be able to just click into it.
Hey, Holly, I think we had a few technical hitches in room one.
Oh, maybe that's why. Let me just have a quick look.
Although also I did the annoying student thing of pressing the button so early that I didn't actually know what I was meant to be doing in the breakout room either.
Oh, that's okay. It says that Matt Gordon's in that room and
Oh, okay.
Alison's trying to
Yeah.
join. So I don't know if you want to try and join back into it. It might be that everyone's joined quite quickly.
If I can figure out.